Welcome back to the Blue Gender Retrospective. And for this installment of it, I'd like to discuss the setting of the series. Now, like any story, Blue Gender's setting is very important in setting up both the world and the characters of it, and it does a very good job in doing so. Now, the setting of Blue Gender is one of duality, and it is a duality between the clean, modern, cramped, and rigid Second Earth, and the dirty, primal, vast, and lawless First Earth. Earth. The original Earth is a place of great danger, as it is overrun by the Blue and many other hostile life forms. Humans have long lost their position of dominance over the Earth, and had retreated into space at least a decade ago. It is an eerie and overrun land where giant bugs and weeds now live and prowl undisturbed on what were once busy city streets. This is a truly wild landscape, a one where nature is reclaiming the dominance that it once had over the entirety of the Earth. It has gone feral, and there is no quarter given to humans, as they are no longer exempt from the law of the jungle. Kill or be killed. This Earth does an excellent job of immediately establishing the real risks present, of creating suspense, and showing the true power of the Blue, as its many ruined cities prove that no one is safe from the treacherous new world that it has become. I really like this twist on a post-apocalyptic Earth, as in most cases, a post-apocalyptic Earth is portrayed as a desolate and lifeless land. It is a land that is no longer capable of supporting life and is therefore deadly. There is no plants and there are no animals in this scenario, but simply unforgiving soil. But Blue Gender does the exact opposite. In this case, the post-apocalyptic Earth is deadly because it is overflowing with life. And in this case, that includes the Blue and I assume several other invasive species that have probably gotten out of control by this point, and while humanity is suffering, the Earth doesn't seem to be at all. In fact, it seems to be on an upswing, as without people, nature is reclaiming almost everything. It's a great new take on the idea of an Earth that can no longer be inhabited by humans. In this case, Earth cannot be inhabited by humans because other forms of life have surpassed humans. It's a great idea that the Earth can be apocalyptic for people, but not necessarily for the Earth itself. It isn't all bad though, and I think that's a testament to the series. You see, it would have been easy to say that, oh, the Earth has gone feral and that's bad, and humanity needs to essentially break it again. But that's not the path that Blue Gender takes. Instead, the Earth is also used to show that humanity can live in turn with nature, and that there is some hope at a future provided we learn from the mistakes of the past. The setting does this by establishing nomadic camps, and survivor encampments, and even peaceful isolated villages here and there. By establishing that the first Earth, a mostly hostile land, is also still capable of housing some humans who live in peace with it relatively successfully, the setting craft tells us that yes, humans messed up, but also, yes, they can live with nature, and thus live on. It supports the ecological themes of the series, and the theme of living on in general, all the while still presenting a tangible danger 99% of the time. Ironically, though this organic space is more dangerous than the man-made Earth, it is actually man's natural home, and while Second Earth collapses in on itself, the first Earth, the original Earth, breathes anew by the end of the series and eventually even hosts humans again. On the topic of the Second Earth, the stations which compose it, medical, military, educational, and resources, are almost the exact opposite of Earth. They're clean and well organized, streamlined and disciplined to the extreme. Their cleanliness and order initially portray an air of both safety and order, and it is no doubt that this is intentional. Where the old world is represented by feral and uncertain living, Second Earth is extremely controlled and scheduled. There is nothing left to chance, and everything seems to have some kind of assigned purpose and to be squared away. However, where First Earth hid a layer of hope, Second Earth hides a layer of despair, as it is too controlled and cramped for its own good. There is no room for individuality or freedom, and as such the humans there don't necessarily too happy, or even human. There is just a set schedule and a set of ideals to follow, and in this artificial world, the stagnating people even start to exhibit some abnormal behaviors. Even Miyagi's more lenient hand cannot seem to address all these issues, and it ultimately implodes. Second Earth's artificial nature underlies the artificial and unhealthy nature of the society it hosts. In the end, it represents man's failure in his attempts to create and completely control his environments. Together, these two settings show the dangers and hopes of humanity, all the while examining how humanity's environments can shape it, and how humans in turn can shape their environments. One thing both settings have in common, though, is their very visceral feel. Whether on Second Earth or First Earth, nowhere really feels welcoming or friendly. Sure, Second Earth might be very clean and organized, but we can see from its discipline and overtly anti-individualistic society that it's not necessarily what you would call friendly. As for First Earth, well, the blue definitely don't seem like very good hosts. This sense of being on edge, this sense of unwelcomeness, really helps flesh out the visceral feel of the series. Since nowhere necessarily feels safe, it signals to the viewer that there really are high stakes here. And this also signals to us a high stress situation, which of course lends itself to stressing out the characters, and therefore helps create emotional tension. Even areas that are supposed to be safe are not necessarily safe, whether it's the abandoned and overrun space bases on First Earth, or the testing and training facilities of Second Earth, where we get to see that even in training, extreme pain can be expected. As in real life, seemingly anything unexpected could happen at any moment, and this really does help feed into the dramatic, intense air that the series tries to present itself with. All of this and how the settings are already kind of set up to be very utilitarian, or maybe even a little dull, helps ground the series a lot. One of the things that makes Blue Gender stick out so much is how grounded it feels. Supporting this visceral feel and helping to ground the show further is also the use of darker colors and more practical designs. The use of darker colors and duller shades helps ground the show and set it apart. So does the use of more utilitarian and boxy designs. There's no fantastic space base, there's no brilliant mechs with odd curves and such, but instead very boxy and modular ships, and, at least by mech standards, relatively mundane and basic mechs. While all of these things are very advanced by today's standards, they don't feel particularly brilliant or eye-catching. It doesn't seem like they were designed solely around looking cool. They instead seem almost entirely practical, and designed around function. When placed in combat and combined with both the scale of forces present, the scale of losses incurred, and combined with the relatively meager gains produced in combat operations, these designs really help the fights of Blue Gender feel more like a real war as opposed to a series of anime fights. As a result, Blue Gender feels not like a flashy sci-fi tale, but more like first-hand combat footage of a war that hasn't happened yet, really setting it apart from the often protagonist-focused smaller series of fights we see in many series. In fact, Blue Gender's greatest setting strength is the fact that its setting is kind of dull or boring, because it means there's nothing to distract us from really how dire the situation is and how bad it can be. It also helps to support the feel of general unease, or general coldness mentioned earlier. In fact, Blue Gender's setting excels at grounding the series, and this is actually how it helps Blue Gender stand out the most. It helps the story abandon the conventional structure of a hero somehow just main charactering his way to victory, and instead guides us and the cast through the very real process of coming to terms with and somehow working around insurmountable odds. Because the setting does seem very practical, because it does seem kind of dirty, because it does seem as though something that could actually exist, it lets us know that this is a real struggle, and it lets us know that the characters are human too, that they are real people, and that they're feeling real emotions. If there's anything I really want to say about Blue Gender's setting, it's that it really does help ground the series, and this grounding is one of the things that helps it stand out the most. As instead of providing an unrealistic world with unrealistic solutions, it shows us a very gritty and emotional tale. By lending an air of physical plausibility, it also lends an air of emotional plausibility, and helps us get into the thought process and feelings of the characters even more. It just makes everything seem so real. Something else that can set a scene is of course music. Now I would like to take a second to speak of the original soundtrack. The OST of Blue Gender is actually quite good, even if it is rarely the focal point of any big moments. Like the physical setting, it is a good split between modern and industrial feelings, and more earthy and softer ones. In between, there is a slathering of good orchestral pieces which can serve to either raise suspense or emotions when appropriate. Many of these pieces are used quite well, if not necessarily to make a scene, then to enhance it. Clean industrial pieces like Torque can help streamline action sequences. More visceral action scenes like Protostar really add grime to their scene, and slow and more human pieces like Cure, with their ethereal vocals, do a great job infusing mystery or humanity into their scenes. I especially like the piece Cycle, as its use of winding strings emulates the buzz of a fly, and it helps set us on edge. Of all of the original soundtrack, I'd also like to take a second to speak of the opening theme. Now the opening theme is called Toke Hanate, and it actually has a Japanese and an English version. Now while that may sound odd, as nowadays the opening of an anime is almost always left alone, they don't tend to dub it, remember Blue Gender came out in the 90s, when localizers were still afraid that anime was too foreign to succeed in America. As a result, they went ahead and made an English cover, complete with a somewhat clunky and direct translation, and a few other touches. I think these other touches including upping the bass volume, modifying a few rhythms, and maybe even tweaking the key a bit. I can't really tell quite for sure. This wasn't needed then, of course, and there's a reason they don't do this kind of stuff anymore. But it's fascinating to me as this is something you simply just don't see anymore. In fact, people would probably get upset about it if it was done today. And most people generally agree that of the translated openings of the 90s and early 2000s, the Japanese versions are usually better. I would tend to agree. However, I really like the English version a lot, and I can't I can't explain it. Maybe it's because it's keyed a little lower, or I like the additional bass to fill out the sound, but Brandy Evans McComb, who Funimation unfortunately doesn't credit, does a fantastic job delivering the slightly clunky translation with a passion and strength that just really sells it. I mean, the Japanese opening is still really good, but I can't help but love both the honest artistry and pure cheese of the English cover. And honest artistry is a good way to describe the setting of Blue Gender. While it isn't the most fantastical, this is kind of a strength of it. It excels in that it is a grounded setting that portrays the true stakes of the situation at hand. It helps set the mood and lets us know that the blue are not to be trifled with, and that we are entering into a dangerous world where nothing is guaranteed. It grounds the series and allows it to shine not as a shiny new fantasy, but as a gritty and visceral tale of survival.